So here we are again. It's our third
Hello.
episode of Conversations with Kristine van Dooren, that I have the honor of interviewing you. And the last couple of episodes we talked about the making of the podcast, finding purpose, and what it's like for you, reminiscing and reflecting on the past and kind of bringing it all up again. And this time I want to ask you more personal questions, just out of the perspective of listening to your podcast, and
Okay.
questions that have come up for me when I listen to it, and that I could imagine that might interest other people too.
Yeah. All
um,
right.
yeah. So you said you were a young girl in the 70s, and you traveled to Europe to get away and to follow the rock festivals. Am I saying that right? Yeah. And you were there with your sister, and you were 19. I think that's incredible. And so tell me about just the reality compared to right now. You got on the airplane, and then you had no contact with your parents. Like,
Yeah.
it's really expensive to make a phone call, and it was just payphone.
Yeah. Exactly.
So what was that
And
like?
in those days, the best price you would get is if you did a charter flight. So that would mean everybody on that flight is chartered to leave on a certain day and a return on a certain day.
Oh,
So we had a 3-month charter flight that was for the summer vacation. The
okay. So that was the
California
plan.
summer vacation, because my sister still had a year left of high school. And so it was the 3-month summer vacation.
And how old was she?
17.
17. Did you so you were planning on 3 months, and what did it end up being for you by the time you got back home to California? How
A
many
year and a
years?
half.
A year and a half. Okay. And your parents had no idea.
Well, the main reason that I wanted to go, it was popular even then in those days, was this backpacking and going to youth hostels and getting a Eurail ticket, this thing of traveling through Europe. And it still is fascinating for Americans to come to Europe. But my main goal was because of art and music.
Right.
And at the time, I was 19, and I was planning on returning at the beginning of September to start college, a photography college in Santa Barbara. So that was my schedule. And my idea was, I'm going to get all these cool pictures in Europe, and I'll be able to use it as material in my photography college.
So, and then you ended up taking much more pictures because you were there longer than 3 months. What happened to all those photographs?
Well, I really don't have so many pictures. A lot of them I didn't save, that were just kind of touristy pictures of the Louvre or things like that. And in those days also, you didn't take so many photographs,
Right.
because you're not running around, with a cell phone. And I had 2 cameras with me. I had a backpack, and I had 2 like heavy cameras. And so it's more kind of like, take a picture of the lace on the window in Amsterdam, or, the sun going down in Amsterdam on the canals, or these things I kind of have in my mind. Or the first shot I took when we arrived in London with a poor man sleeping on the street. I'd never before in my life seen something like that. So it was always, the way I took pictures was very, purposeful, not just like click, 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 click. And we didn't hardly take pictures of ourselves, or we didn't take pictures of ourselves.
That's true.
That's a new thing.
Right. And then you had your own dark room, but you didn't take it to Germany, obviously, right? It was in the States.
Yeah, my parents' house. I mean, that's chemicals and equipment and stuff. No. So, but I had tons of black and white film for my 35 millimeter camera, and for my what's it called? Double reflex camera, the kind you look down into.
Okay.
And so I had color film, I had color slides, and I had black and white film. that lasted me like 3 years or something.
And when you were traveling through Europe, did you regret bringing two cameras? I mean, that sounds so heavy to me, but you were happy. Yeah?
No. It's all about the cameras. And because I was, that had been my world the last couple of years,
Yeah.
mostly taking pictures at rock concerts. And because I was planning on studying photography.
Right.
So that was the most important thing. And when you're young, you don't think about, oh, it's too heavy.
Okay. When you were in Holland, you were at a festival where you met some German guys. What was that festival like? Do you have nice memories of it, or
That
some
festival
highlights?
was in Aachen, Germany, which is near Holland.
Near Holland.
And that was the first festival we went to. Like, we were in England, and then we came to Europe and we're sightseeing around. And it was Pink Floyd and I mean, I've even recently listened to Pink Floyd, because there's this feeling about the music, and not even so much the words. I mean, sometimes they really did have messages, but yeah. And I mean, I don't know, for 3 or 4 years, everything that influenced me was listening to music on the record player or live concerts with rock groups. It was so exciting. And that's what we wanted to see when we came to Europe. But it was like a brand new experience being in Aachen with all these German kids. They were dressed different than us. Of course, it was like long-haired, mostly hippie type people and stuff. And I don't know if I took pictures there. I don't have pictures. But interesting is, I asked my sister, who lives in California, I said, what do you remember about that festival in Aachen? And she said, my bag got stolen.
Unbelievable.
But because her bag got stolen, we met some German boys there from West Berlin, and they helped us get it sorted out with the lost and found or something. And she did get her bag. No, she didn't get her bag back, but she got her passport and her traveler's checks. That's what you
Thank
use
God.
in those days. So, but because of that purse and meeting these guys, one guy's name was Peter. They were high school kids. They said, you have to come to West Berlin. Led Zeppelin is coming. So
and that's what led you to meet my dad, and what led us to be sitting here right now. And like in those first festivals that you were at, were you already smoking dope and taking drugs then, or drinking a lot of alcohol, or were you still pretty, like, what's the word, naive and innocent? American
Well, my
girl?
sister being younger, I don't think she ever did anything, but the first time that I was offered like marijuana or I think even LSD was people that we met at the Fillmore rock conference in San Francisco.
Okay.
And then I was with like my kind of circle of friends. And
so that was in California before you traveled to Europe.
Yeah. And most of the time my younger sister wasn't, in on that. But I never drank alcohol. I was never interested in alcohol. And yeah, I never got into all of that so much. I was dressing like a hippie, and I was listening to hippie music, but I was planning on going to college, and I wanted to be a professional photographer. Right. And so this one thing of this hippie life with the music is just hang out and do nothing and smoke dope. That was not my goal in life.
Right.
I had goals.
Like that your drug, if you would even want to say that, I mean, you're not the type that needs to like go overboard with things, but to me, that's what you appear to me, but probably was the music and taking pictures and the fashion, right? That's what was really turning you on. The way I hear your stories. And do you remember the last time? Like, do you remember when it was the last time that you smoked dope, and then after that you never smoked again? Because I don't remember you ever taking drugs.
No. It would have been during the time my sister and I were traveling in Europe, the 3 months we weren't doing anything. And I don't know, maybe, it kind of was typical if you were with a bunch of hippie crowds at a concert or something, that a joint would be passed around.
Mhm.
But, we didn't buy anything and we didn't look for anything. That wasn't our thing. But when I ended up staying in Berlin with Thomas, he was into hash and LSD and stuff. And that's when I started probably smoking it more regular, because he always had it. And so the last time would have been when we went back to California, and we were with hippie friends again, always passing the joint around. That was usually, an evening of fun, even if you were at home, was music and passing a joint around and talking philosophy. Talking about how bad the world is, it's all going down, and how evil the Vietnam War was.
Yeah.
But when I got pregnant with you, which was the end of 72, that was for me, I'm not doing it, no smoking. And, from then on,
Ah, okay.
I wasn't
So that was
interested.
already after jail. So you had been smoking dope at your house when you were growing your own marijuana and before you went to jail. And then after jail, when you guys promised to become good citizens, you were smoking dope again. It was
Yeah,
shortly
probably.
after that you got pregnant, right?
Yeah, well, a few months after we got out of jail, then we got married.
Right.
And then shortly after that, I was pregnant. And then that's when everything changed. But I think it wasn't only the pregnancy thing was because Thomas, as a foreigner in California and America, he was on probation. He had like a 2-year probation thing.
Mhm.
So I was worried about the law. I
Yeah.
would have that type of conscience,
Yeah.
but he didn't care.
That's probably also something that I should be thankful for, because it's probably not necessarily the best thing to just stop the day you find out you're pregnant. But probably you were already not taking drugs a few months before that already.
Well,
Yeah.
to me, I think to most people, there's a difference when you say drugs, that marijuana, it is
Yeah.
a plant and you smoke it,
Yeah.
like people
Sorry.
smoke
Yeah.
cigarettes.
Right.
It's kind of like people who drink wine, but I never did anything, on a regular basis, and I didn't really care about it.
Interesting. And did you ever later in life, with the 5 kids and in Germany and being a pastor's wife and everything, did you ever, or like now, do you ever think like it would be fun to smoke dope again?
Oh, no, but I mean, it's just like, that's what I was saying before, like the past for me, because it really was not only the youth, but at the point that we became Christians, when I was 22, 23, around the time after you were born, our life changed so radically. Everything completely, where we lived, what we did, what we thought, music, everything changed. So from that point on, it's like the past that I don't remember and have a
Wow.
connection to. But I have an interesting story about that. Is I talk about in the podcast, my hippie girlfriend and her husband. I've talked about it a number of times. And I visited her a few years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago in California. And she was living on her own. And we went to a birthday party of her friends, and they were drinking and passing marijuana around. And it was so weird and odd and funny. I mean, I was just like sitting there. I was watching them all become drunk and spaced out.
Huh.
And it was like, we're in 2 different worlds here.
Wow.
It
Wow.
was interesting. And I had to drive her car home because she couldn't drive. And I had to get a neighbor to help her get into the house because she
Oh,
couldn't
goodness.
hardly walk.
Wow.
So
She's your age, yeah? Over 70?
yeah, yeah. And we've known each other since we were in seniors in high school. And we were
Wow.
always good friends. We've always kept in contact. And that was really an eye-opener, because there are many people my age from the hippie days who still are into all of that. The lifestyle, the mentality, the drugs,
Mhm.
and most of them, I would say, have sad lives.
Mm.
that's where it goes.
Wow. Interesting. Is there something, if you look back to that old life of being a hippie, of the drugs or the smoking dope and kind of living in a teepee and not pursuing a normal job and not caring that you went to jail, or I guess you did care, but you definitely took the risk, that you regret? Because I mean, usually, you can say things have brought me to where I am now. For example, I'm glad that I've been able to, from a young age, listen to your stories of smoking dope, because to me, it solved that topic for me. Like, I feel like,
Oh,
even though I never did it, been there, done that. Like, I just do not care.
yeah,
I've not touched a cigarette in my life.
yeah,
And because I heard the sides, what's the downside of it from you.
right.
And even for that, I'm thankful. But yeah,
Yeah.
is there something particularly, like, if I asked you now, if you look back, that you regret or that you wish you wouldn't have?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a tricky question or thought because, you can't change anything.
Yeah.
But I regret what it did to Thomas because he was way more into, and marijuana is kind of a light type thing, but hash is much stronger.
Mhm.
And with all of his gang in West Berlin, they were smoking hash and they were doing LSD and peyote and I don't know what else they were doing. And I mean, I tell about it in the episodes. I mean, he went kind of crazy. And what I see in looking back is there's two kinds of addiction. One is like, where your body has to have it, otherwise you can't function. But I think the bigger thing, or with these type of, drugs, is the emotional addiction. Like you can't enjoy life and relax and have a good time. I mean, people nowadays also drink a lot. That's like, you know, that belongs to having a good time.
Yeah.
And what I regret the most is what it did to him.
Wow.
Um,
And is there
just
anything that you regret, like, because you said your poor parents, what they went through? Um,
definitely poor parents.
is there something
Because
specific that you remember where you wish you could turn back time?
yeah, I've thought about that a lot too, as I'm doing these episodes, because I talk quite a bit about my parents and I had a good relationship with my parents and I have nothing but good memories and thankful for everything that they built into my life,
Yeah.
and that I grew up in a safe, loving home and two parents who were together, not divorced. My mother was home, she did everything for her three daughters. And I mean, like now, probably being a mother and a grandmother, um, you realize how much pain, I put my parents through
Mhm.
by living with this boyfriend and then bringing him back to California and then, ending up in jail. I mean, terrible nightmare stories of what my parents had to go through. And for them, it was also shocking because up until the time I left to go to Europe and then ended up staying in West Berlin, I had been the good girl. I was the older sister. My dad was so proud of everything I did and sending me off to college soon. And then I end up living with this hippie guy in Berlin. And then they're getting, depressing letters from me of how difficult it was. And
Mhm.
then we go to California. He paid for us to come to California because he wanted me to come back. And then it was nothing but trouble, heartache,
Didn't he
trouble.
even pay for the when you guys were in jail to get both of you out? Wow.
Yeah, first he paid our flights. He probably regretted that. But then I probably, coming back with my boyfriend. Yeah, then we ended up in jail like a year after we came to California. And then he paid for the lawyer, and his mother helped a lot. that's then a whole nother story of how my parents became friends.
Wow.
Friends in suffering over their
But
children.
before you went to Europe, didn't you say that you also went to some to various guru conventions and started taking drugs secretly or whatever? But didn't you say your dad
Yeah.
one time went with you to some Indian guru? Do you think he was
The
already
Maharishi. And the reason the Maharishi yogi was famous was because of the Beatles. They had gone there and it was
Oh yeah.
advertised, was in all the magazines, all the beautiful, their girlfriends with their saris on and learning transcendental meditation and stuff.
Mhm.
And wow, he was coming to Oakland or Berkeley there in California, not too far from where we lived. And so my dad went with me. I mean, he didn't have to do that. Of course he wanted to kind of protect me, but he really, I think sincerely wanted to know, what is this all about?
Right. To try to relate to you and everything.
And because around that time, I had said to him what I was learning from the hippie movement is that God is dead. And that comes from Nietzsche, I believe, and that was one of Timothy Leary, who was promoting the LSD. That was a big thing. And so it wasn't only that he went with me, I had already been having conversations with him about the books that I was reading. And so he was trying to understand what is happening to my daughter.
Wow. If both of them aren't alive anymore, if they were sitting here right now and you had a chance to apologize, because I know that you talk in your podcast about a situation where you guys asked for forgiveness for
Yes.
some of the things some of the pain that you had caused them. Is there something now that you have been reflecting and rewriting and diving back into your past and remembering all these things? Has anything come up where you thought, oh, I wish I could, apologize or talk to them or anything? Has anything ever come up like that? I mean, you don't have to answer. I don't know. It's just
Yeah. No,
that's what I've been thinking when I listen to it.
It's because I've also, as a mother, gone through some various sorts of pain
Yeah.
and worry over
Yeah.
my daughters and
Yeah.
my
You can imagine what 5
grandkids.
girls can do to their parents.
Yeah, and so I'm a lot more understanding, or than
Mhm.
reminds me of my parents.
Mhm.
And it's like on one thing, if my mother, for example, was listening to me, she'd be crying all the time about these stories, and um, I don't even know the impact that it must have had on my parents that I stayed in Berlin, um, because all of a sudden they only had 2 daughters left, and I was the older sister. I did all kinds of things, with my younger sisters. And all of a sudden their first baby didn't come home again.
Yeah.
That was devastating, I'm sure. And, but I mean, even though we had a moment in time, or probably a few times after we became Christians, but even before that, sometimes we said sorry, about this jail situation and everything. But it's kind of like, you say sorry because you're kind of sorry, but you cannot understand what it's like on there. For us, everything was kind of like, it's no big deal, we're just, zenning out in our lives, everything's going to be cool and groovy. And, if we would say sorry that, we ended up in jail, it wasn't really that big a deal that we were in jail, I was fasting and meditating when I was in jail, But um, but knowing as an adult parent, the pain that they must have gone through, that's the worst. And now I think the most important thing that I would want to express to my parents is how grateful I am for the immense amount of patience
Mhm.
and love and prayers
Mhm.
and endurance that they carried. A lot of parents would just say bye-bye.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that I have still so many questions, but it almost seems to me like we could end this episode now, because we've talked a lot more about the whole issue with your parents and regret than I had originally planned on asking. And
Okay.
it feels to me like myself and the listeners, we can, go walk away from this episode and consider if there's maybe things that we want to talk with our living parents, where we should like reconsider what we've done to them, or where we might want to communicate or reflect or search for reconciliation. I encourage you, if you're listening, and I definitely, for my part, really, since my daughter's a young adult now, like you, and since I've been listening to this podcast, that's always going on in my mind. Man, her parents, what they put through it. Oh, okay. Well, what does that mean for me as a parent, for my children that are in that age now? How can I, follow in those footsteps? Is there anything I need to do better? But also thinking, what have I done myself to you? And my dad is not alive anymore.
Oh.
And I mean, there's many things that I regret being a daughter, and that I've already think about and reflect. And it's pretty crazy. And I feel like this podcast definitely can inspire all of us to go home and to just be a bit more aware of our loved ones around us. And
Yeah.
And,
yeah, that's so important.
Yeah. And I'm already excited though for the next episode, because I have so many more questions that I
Oh
want.
dear.
So thank you guys.
Bring them on.
Yeah. And don't forget to follow Kristine van Dooren on Instagram. Look at the pictures and kind of get into the whole vibe of way back then, and hear her story, and look out for the next episode of Conversations with Kristine van Dooren, and talk to you soon.
Yeah.
Thank
Looking
you,
forward
Bob.
to it. Bye.
Bye.